This video is a second part to the villains video I uploaded about 2 months ago. In that video, I talked about which villain was the most evil in their actions, but today I want to take a look at their motivations. You don't have to have watched the first video in order to watch this one, but I would recommend it as we're continuing right where that video left off. Now, if editing me is competent, a link to the video should pop up in the top right of the screen right about now. Right about now. Oh, god damn it. Whatever. If you want to watch that video, just click on my channel. Oh, now you show up, huh? Right. For those who want to watch the first video, click now or forever be silent. For those who've been waiting for like the past minute and a half for me to start the video, sorry, let's get right into it. So, let's go back to the whiteboard and magically fade in all the villains from the last episode. Now, let's make that a little bit smaller, copy the chart, let's cross that out, change it with a new title, erase the axis, use my duplication exploit to double all the stickers. And I think that's about it. Also, respect to like the 3 people out there who understood why a Minecraft donkey just appeared on the screen. Last time we rated the villains based on their evilness and effectiveness. This time, let's look at how good their motivation is, and how reasonable their actions were compared to their motivation. Last time we went in order of the villains' first appearance in the show, so let's just reverse that entire list for this video, cause why not? First up is Allura. Now, I might be slightly biased here, but I think Allura's motivation is absolutely justified. She wants to go back to her brother, and dedicates a majority of her life to finding him. In the last video, I speculated that there might be more information in the leak somewhere, and then Special 4 released, giving us more lore and the first time Allura and Altero actually meet in the show. What a lucky guess, huh? I'm gonna say her motivation is just straight up at the max. She goes through great lengths at her own expense and those of other ponies to try and find him. But were her actions reasonable? Honestly, not really. In the Secrets of Starlight special, we see how friendly the Auroricorns actually are. If she just explained her story, I'm 100% sure they would have just helped her try and find the Nova Charm to return to Equestria anyway. After all, this is exactly what happened in the leaked special. As soon as Sunny and the others see the reason she's doing all this, they just give her the charm and allow her to use it to find her brother. Let's move her down here. Next up is Opaline Arcana, and honestly, did we ever really get any clear motivation from her? Like, sure, she had some childhood beef with Tia and Luna, but I don't think we ever really got definitive motivations beyond her just being evil. If all of this is because of her not being accepted by the Philly sisters, it's one of the most petty reasons for taking over the entire land that we see. Neither her motivation nor her actions would be reasonable in the slightest. Unlike Opaline, I can sort of see where Sprout is coming from in the movie. He's basically hitched his shadow, longing to be in the spotlight but never being able to do so. So when he finally gets his chance, he takes it. But then he didn't know where to stop and everything got out of hand. I definitely say there is a decent score for motivation here, as he just wants his time to shine and prove to his mother that he can do it. Whatever it means in this context. As for how reasonable his actions are, I honestly think they're not as bad as people think they are. Now, I'm not saying Sprout did nothing wrong, I see you all waiting for me to say it. I'm just saying that at that point in the movies, the Earth ponies are still very terrified of the unicorns and Pegasi. The idea of a somewhat charismatic leader stepping up and spouting about how they should defend themselves isn't entirely unreasonable. Are his following actions of building an army of Earth ponies reasonable? To an extent, yes. But I think Sprout's Mr. Big Robot Pony thing was a bit excessive. Not to mention his willingness to continue the fight after Queen Haven and Alphabettle made it very clear they're not here for war. And destroying Sunny's lighthouse? Completely unreasonable. So I think pretty good motivation, but not that reasonable for actions. Now back to G4. The last individual villain we see is Cozy Glow. Cozy's motivations aren't exactly known if I'm not mistaken. She conspires with Tirek, but I believe we don't know how they became pen pals and who initialized the first contact between them. For all we know, Tirek could have been manipulating Cozy Glow the entire time, which would mean her motivation would be on the lower end. However, I personally believe that Cozy was the one to start their whole pen pal situation. I don't see how Tirek would know about Cozy's existence to begin with, because up until her attempted takeover of Equestria, she flies completely under the radar of everyone. So much so that Twilight didn't even notice her star student being in contact with Tirek and plotting to get rid of all the magic the entire time. For the sake of continuing this video though, I'm just gonna pretend like my theory is the truth for now. In which case, Cozy's sudden turn to evil is basically entirely unprompted. there's no real motivation for her to turn evil besides a potential hunger for power. As for how reasonable her actions are, if she was being instructed by Tirek on how to gain enough power to take over Equestria, stealing all the magic through ancient artifacts seems reasonably on brand for Tirek, but also not enough to justify her own actions. There were two characters who ended up in Twitter jail in the first part, one of those being Chancellor Naysay, and honestly, I'm just gonna leave him there. I will not pretend to try and justify his actions for a comedic bit. I'll wait a little bit longer before I accidentally get myself cancelled, thank you very much. As some of you might have noticed already, the Storm King and Tempest were together in the previous video, but once they got out of the donkey, they got split up. They were split up. That's because I think as far as motivation goes, Tempest and the Storm King are very different. Tempest's motivation for helping the Storm King is just so she can get her horn back, which is fair motivation in my opinion, especially since the Storm King promised her he could help. As Tempest didn't know the Storm King was bullshitting her the entire time, her actions in return are somewhat reasonable. Going as far as to take over entire kingdoms and destroy cities, all for restoring your broken horn, is very, very extreme in any situation. So let's just put her somewhere in the middle for reasoning. The Storm King, on the other hand, just wants more power, which I suppose can be used as motivation, though since there isn't anything to back it up with, I won't rate him very high for either of the scores. The next one might be a little bit controversial. Then again, I don't think many people have very strong opinions about this character. Stygian basically gets ignored by all of his friends while they're off playing hero. All he wants is just to be included. I can totally understand Stygian's eventual turn on them, although the way he does so is quite extreme. I get that he wouldn't want to be friends with the Pillars anymore, but wanting to destroy them and drain all the hope for Equestria, not so much. Now onto the series of EQG villains. First we have Principal Cinch, whose motivation it was to preserve the reputation of Crystal Prep, which, for a fancy-ass prep school, makes a lot of sense as much as I hate to admit it. She just ends up taking it quite a bit too far, which unfortunately also isn't entirely unrealistic, but I definitely think it's still unreasonable. As a school, it's definitely a useful tool to push your students to improve, but not to the point of them abandoning all rational thinking in order to try and please your increasingly high standards. Realistic motivation, not very reasonable actions. Gloriosa Daisy, just like Naysay, was in Twitter jail for the last video. And while Naysay is still in there, I do want to rank Gloriosa for this video, mostly because I can totally understand her motivation of wanting to save her camp. You know, the one she kept running for years and probably invested a significant amount of money in trying to keep afloat. Wanting to save the camp is very, very good motivation. But trapping the kids in there and forcing them to stay is definitely not a reasonable response to that. Like, if you're gonna threaten or kidnap someone in the woods, do that to Filthy Rich, the guy who's threatening your business, not the school kids staying at your camp. Another villain with good motivation but bad reasoning. And looking at the chart right now, if we get any more villains in this corner, it's going to be difficult to fit them all in, wow. Fortunately, next up it's Juniper Montage, who had the worst rating out of all the villains as far as their actions went. And honestly, their motivations aren't looking much better. She sabotaged an entire film shoot and eventually trapped the human main six in a magic mirror, all out of bitterness and jealousy of wanting to become a famous model or actor. I can sort of understand the appeal of wanting to be famous, but I don't think it's a justified motivation for any sort of evil actions. So she gets a pretty low ranking here. As for her actions, trying to get into the mind of Juniper Montage, I can kind of see the reasoning behind them. She wants to play the lead in a movie, so she sabotages the shoots in such a way that the actual actress gets blamed and she could play the lead instead. That part all makes sense and happens in Hollywood like all the time. The only issue is that Juniper seems to take it way too far, so much so that the entire movie is almost cancelled, which would have only hindered her goals of becoming famous if she had succeeded. From last video's lowest score to the highest, it's Starlight Glimmer, the pony that almost got the previous video demonetized. Thank you, Hasbro. Regardless, the two major points people always have about evil Starlight is her actions were so extreme and she's so powerful, and wow, her motivation is so absolute ass! And honestly, I have to agree. Her motivation for starting Our Town is complete garbage. Sombra got a cutie mark, which led to the two of you growing apart because he went off to study at Celestia's school in Canterlot, but there is no reasonable way from that to come to the conclusion that the whole principle of cutie marks is evil and to try and start a whole cult from it. Like, I get it, Sunburst is cute and all, and I've said that during my cutie marks video, and he might be your only friend, but starting a cult based off of all of that? No. I can, however, sympathize a little more with Starlight at the end of Season 5 when she confronts Twilight again. In Starlight's mind, she is correct about the whole cult, and Twilight and her friends came to ruin her perfect little safe haven. So she seeks retaliation against Twilight. All of that makes sense to me, but once again her actions are very extreme. Wanting to destroy the whole world over losing a cult? Actually, now that I think about it, that does seem pretty realistic for cult leaders. Regardless, with her first appearance having bad motivation and unreasonable actions, and her second appearance having some realistic motivation but also unreasonable actions, let's place Starlight right here. Next up are the Dazzlings, the sirens who were banished to the human world by Starswirl the Bearded. We never really get a definitive motivation as to why the Dazzlings feed on creatures' disharmony through their siren song, but it mostly seems that it was just to become stronger. As far as motivation for their original attacks goes, it's non-existent from what I can tell. But their motivation after their banishment, which is to gather up enough power to go back to Equestria likely in a ploy for revenge, makes total sense to me. If you got banished to another realm, the main goal you'd have is making your way back, right? Seems only logical to me. As for their actions for getting back, seems quite reasonable. If you want to get back to your original world, and you know you can gain energy and power to do so through your siren song, you're gonna use that damn siren song to gain power. Then again, like I just said, there's no real motivation for their original attacks in Equestria, so we can't really judge how reasonable their actions as a villain are, so let's place them right about here. For Tirek, we need to dive a little more into the comics. In the Fiendship is Magic comics, we learned that Tirek has always been somewhat of a power-hungry asshole. He wants to steal more magic to overthrow his father, King Vorak, and eventually travel to Equestria to steal the magic there. I can understand someone as overconfident as Tirek clashing with his dad, especially since his father was in a position of power as the king. His actions make sense to an extent of getting enough power to overthrow his own kingdom. He has the ability to drain creatures' magic, so it makes sense for him to use that ability. Same goes for eventually traveling to Equestria. As is described in that comic, Equestria has the most powerful magic, so in his pursuit of power, going after the ponies seems reasonable enough. Moving on to the final EQG villain of the list, Sunset Shimmer. As far as I can tell, Sunset never really had any motivation for being the way she is, just that she wanted to be the most powerful and didn't want to wait to get it. I can sort of see where she's coming from. If you're very impatient, being told you have to practice and study for years to see improvement is the worst thing ever. Then again, it's absolutely no reason to be turning full on evil. Maybe just hold a grudge against somebody or something. As for her actions, while I appreciate her creativity for hypnotizing all the other students to use them as an army to take over Equestria, I feel like there would have been easier ways to go about this. After all, she is wielding an element of harmony, which is like one of the most powerful magical artifacts in Equestria, is it not? I don't think you need an additional army of teenagers to help you. Just like we did with Tirek, for King Sombra's backstory, we have to take a look at the comics as well. In the Siege of the Crystal Empire arc, we learned that Sombra is actually an Umbrum, who got transported to Equestria, sort of as the Chosen One, with the goal to eventually destroy the Crystal Empire. Throughout the years of living there, he is slowly confronted with his darker side, eventually learning that he is indeed more than just a regular unicorn, and that Princess Amore, the pony has protected him since the very beginning, knew all along. As far as motivation goes, I don't think you can get much better than this considering this is MLP after all. As for his actions, right after finding out the truth, he essentially kills Princess Amore. Yes, I know technically he didn't kill Amore, but it sounds way cooler to say it. Are those actions reasonable? Well, I get the frustration and anger Sombra must have felt towards Amore, and he had every right to be absolutely furious with her. I have to say that straight up destroying someone will be unreasonable and extreme in any situation. Now, I know there are some strong opinions in the fandom about Queen Chrysalis and whether she was right or not. I can absolutely understand the whole Chrysalis is just trying to be a good queen by wanting to feed her hive mentality. And just like Sombra, I don't think there is a much better motivation for her actions. How reasonable they are, though? I'm a little torn. With how full Equestria is of love and friendship, I'm sure there would have been a better and less violent way to resolve the conflict, right? And perhaps even have the hive reform under Queen Chrysalis? On the other hand, from the comics we know Chrysalis has been around for over 1,000 years, and I can only imagine what kind of horrors and events must have happened throughout that time. I assume there's good reason behind the fact that every pony is immediately hostile towards the Bogos in the Canterlot wedding episodes. Besides, you know, them trying to invade the city and impersonating and kidnapping a princess. On second thought, disregard that. Regardless, I do think her actions are somewhat reasonable, but not as justified as people claim they are. Now on to some of the more minor antagonists in the show. Flim Flam. We never really get a proper motivation for why they get up to all their shady and scummy shenanigans, but I think I can make an educated guess in just 5 letters. Money. As much as I hate to admit it, money is a damn good motivation to put aside your moral compass. Just look at the 1% after all. It's not as good of a story as Trixie or Sombra have, but it's honestly up there. When we get to the reasonability of their actions, however, my sympathy quickly ends. It doesn't seem like Flim Flam are particularly strapped for cash. When we first see them in the Super Speedy Cider Squeezy episode, they seem to be quite well off and confident about their ability to sell the machine, as if they've done this 100 times before. I'll give them some credit because they do genuinely seem happy putting their moral compass aside by scamming other ponies out of their bits. Iron Will kind of falls into the same category as the Flim Flam brothers. He seems happy enough to mislead ponies to earn a quick buck, though it feels like Iron Will genuinely has at least some passion for his projects. The Assertiveness course and the Zeppelin tour are great examples of that. He provides an actual service, even if that is usually at the expense of some other ponies. However, the majority of the crowd or audience can still enjoy the show or tour just like normal. I will therefore rank his motivation and reasonability slightly above Flim Flam, just because I think Iron Will might actually have a shot at redemption or something. With Discord, I'm going to take a bit of a different approach. He's getting a really high score for motivation without actually having any. Discord is described as being a creature of chaos, so it makes sense that causing chaos is basically his entire personality, and that he just doesn't know any better. I won't give him the top score like Sombra or Chrysalis, just because with how generally harmless his chaos was, I could have definitely seen him becoming good or redeeming himself at some point. As for his actions, for someone whose purpose it is to cause relatively silly chaos, he does a pretty good job most of the time. Turning clouds into cotton candy, chocolate milk rain, etc. Most of his actions seem reasonable enough, with the exception of the shenanigans he pulls in the maze during his first appearance. Then again, those also kind of make sense as he was trying to avoid the main 6 from using the elements of harmony to turn him into stone again. Second to last is the gay and powerful Trixie. In other videos, I haven't shied away from mentioning that I'm not the biggest fan of Trixie as a character. The same goes for her motivation, because the whole situation in Ghostbusters is entirely valid and good motivation. Wait, huh? In all seriousness, Trixie had no evil intent during her very first appearance. She was a cocky stage magician who was showing off her magical abilities and doing crowd work. Considering you need at least some level of charisma or confidence to perform on stage, there is absolutely nothing wrong with this. The whole situation with Ursa was entirely caused by Snips and Snills' incompetence. Twilight humbling Trixie after beating the Ursa Minor was honestly just that extra unnecessary cherry on top. Now, this doesn't get us very far for a motivation rating, does it? So then why did I just summarize that entire episode? Well, because I personally think that this serves as perfect motivation for the events in Magic Duel. Trixie was, in her eyes, unjustly humiliated by Twilight, which she used as motivation to get stronger and more powerful so she could eventually beat her. All I can really say is, damn, you go, girl! With how highly Trixie thinks of herself, to me, that is entirely justified. Going down the route of powerful magic-enhancing artifacts, though, I can't say I'm a fan. But with how Trixie is, it does make sense that she'd be willing to do whatever it takes to restore her image. Therefore, I think the spot she has in the middle here actually works just fine for her. Remember during how Sombra's part, I said that I personally think destroying some pony else was never the correct answer? For our last villain on the list, I will gladly take that back. Nightmare Moon got banished to the moon for 1,000 years by her very own sister. If that is not a max score for motivation, I don't know what is. Her actions make a lot of sense too, not gonna lie. The first thing you want to do when you get back is get rid of your sister. Well, check. Then you want to go after the one thing you know can stop you from ruling the entire land, the elements of harmony. As far as reasonable actions go, after coming back from 1,000-year banishment, I'd say this is right up there. And when I originally started making this video, I was not expecting Luna of all ponies to end up getting the highest score here. So, now that we've gotten all the villains out of the way and spent 2 videos looking at their actions and motivations, let's see which character got the highest rating overall and which got the lowest. Let's gather all of them together and eliminate any villain that didn't get near the top or bottom spot in either list. Then let's see who got a high rating in both videos or a low rating in both videos. And that should just leave us with these 4 creatures. 2 for the best, that being Discord and Tempest, and 2 for the worst, being Sunset and Juniper. For the worst ones, I think Juniper has to take the first, or I guess last place. Sunset ends up getting redeemed and becomes a good protagonist in the later EQG movies and specials, while Juniper just kind of disappears, I guess? But if you're still watching at this point, first off, why the fuck would you do that to yourself? But secondly, you probably want to know who the best villain is. After thinking about it for a long time, and definitely not just counting the scores I assigned them, the winner is... Discord! While Tempest got slightly higher ratings in the first video, she's ranked slightly lower for this one, while Discord scored really high in both videos, which I guess makes sense because he is the literal embodiment of chaos, which is his whole thing. Well, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed and... Wait. Shit! I just went a whole video without praising a stallion into the heavens. There goes my brand image! Quick! Fuck, I need to find someone to...